Hey, guess what? AOC already endorsed President Joe Biden like 17 months ahead of the election. Here we go.
President's only primary opponents are Marianne Williamson and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Haven't been any rumors about anyone else even thinking about jumping in. Will you be supporting Joe Biden for re-election?
I believe given that field, yes. I think he's done quite well, given the limitations that we have.
And what are those limitations, AOC? He's done quite well, given the limitations that we have. Those limitations being that the only power in this country comes from corporations in the military-industrial complex, and yet you're doing absolutely nothing to stop them. Other than that, smooth sailing, Joe Biden's been doing great, huh? Is that what you mean? Given the limitations?
I do think that there are ebbs and flows, as there are in any presidency. You know, there are areas that I think were quite strong when he came right out of the gate with the American Rescue Plan, and of course the Inflation Reduction Act.
The American Rescue. You know, she doesn't talk about the CARES Act, which was the largest upward transfer of wealth in human history, which she voted for. Isn't that funny?
It's a massive step in terms of our climate agenda. But, you know, there are also...
Their climate agenda made a big dent in terms of their climate agenda. You know, their climate agenda of fracking and opening up Alaska to the Willow Project for oil drilling. You mean that kind of climate agenda? Is that your climate agenda? How about blowing up the Nord Stream pipeline?
That's what I thought.
Having the biggest release of methane gas in the history of the world. Is that part of your climate agenda?
So areas that I think could have gone better. We have major structural issues in this country, and I think it starts with the United States Senate.
And not the House of Reps.
I think that until we have senators that are willing to stand up and stare the filibuster in the eye and stare a lot of structural issues about the Senate.
So she's saying, first of all, the problem isn't in the House, it's in the Senate. It's not her problem. They did everything they were supposed to.
Mm-hmm.
But she says that the U.S. Senate needs to stare the filibuster in the eye. This is from a person who runs from her own constituents. She won't look her own constituents in the eye. Perfect time for me to pause the video, too, by the way.
The United States Senate will be what holds back this country from an enormous amount of progress.
Really? How do you spell that progress? Monsanto? Well, Nick Cruz is going to take her down a few pegs. Here we go.
AOC endorses Joe Biden. There needs to be way more anger. There needs to be way more heat on AOC and Bernie Sanders for taking working class money and then openly selling them out to the establishment. Can you imagine the heat that I would get, the heat that RBN would get if we openly endorse and then campaign for Donald Trump? So that's how I'm treating people who are endorsing Jim Crow Joe for president. So AOC, allow me to read you the record of the person that you are endorsing so enthusiastically. AOC, you're endorsing the guy who is funding ICE to record levels. Joe Biden is funding ICE $6 billion more than Donald Trump. Whatever happened to abolish ICE, AOC? These people are only immigration activists when a Republican is president. Joe Biden approved of the Willow Project. He has banned public drilling, and he is a fracker. I thought he cared about the climate, AOC. They are only climate activists when a Republican is president. Joe Biden is funding ICE more than Donald Trump. Joe Biden took COVID relief funds and sent it to the police. Joe Biden broke the railroad strike. Joe Biden is funding Nazis in Ukraine while escalating war against a global nuclear power. But this is the person you endorsed, AOC? I'm not going to allow the professional managerial class to gaslight me into thinking endorsing Jim Crow Joe for president a year and a half before the election is some sort of 3D chess move. These people are here to lead workers off a cliff.
Well said. Well said. These people are here to lead workers off a cliff. The system needs lefty frauds like them to function. This is true. This is what I've said. It would be better if people like Bernie Sanders and AOC were not in government, because what they do is they give people the false hope that someone in government is working for you, and they're not. AOC and Bernie Sanders are working against you, and they're propping up warmongers. They're helping crush railroad strikes, and they're making sure you'll never get anything you want. including healthcare, because they are already endorsing Joe Biden, who promised to veto healthcare. So they're making sure you'll never get it. There's at least one guy running that's promising people Medicare for all. The system really needs lefty frauds like them to function. How else could the U.S. go around murdering its own citizens and people abroad while at the same time claiming to fight for noble values? The liberal left is the lipstick on the pig. In just 4 years, AOC has gone from bring the ruckus to Joe Biden is doing a good job and I endorse him 18 months before the election. What do you mean by bring the ruckus? This is what she said when she was running the first time.
What the Bronx and Queens needs is Medicare for all. We can do it now. It takes political courage. Start bringing the ruckus on the Democratic Party. That is our job. It's great that everyone thinks these issues are important. We need to make them urgent. This country has only ever changed for the better by groups of people that were willing to put everything on the line for a better future. That's how we got the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement. That's how we got the labor movement, queer rights and marriage equality. It didn't happen by people playing it safe. We have to give it all we got. Don't people realize that the most powerful position you can be in is when you are not materially attached to a position of power? If you're a one-term Congress member, so what? You can make 10 years worth of change in one term if you're not afraid.
The Democratic Party does not do more unless it is pushed. So we need to push them. And they don't like it. I think I annoy them, but but that is our job.
I think I annoy them. Sounds just like Eugene Debs, doesn't she? Remember how Eugene Debs was all giggles when they threw him in prison for opposing the war? I mean, she supports the war, but it's the same thing. She's all giggles. And if they would have forced a vote, that would be violent. So when we did everything she said to do there, they all said we were committing violence. All of them. All of them. They all said we were committing violence. At Glenn Greenwald says, AOC, who ran her 2018 primary campaign based on a vow to wage war against the Democratic Party DC establishment, announces her support for Joe Biden's reelection in the Democratic Party primary on the day he announced cluster bombs for Ukraine. Yeah, I think given the field, remember she said, given the field, I think I'll go with the cluster bombs. Do I think we could do better? Yes, maybe paint the cluster bombs with a frowny face so that little children won't play with them. Jesus Christ. And here it is. This is my favorite. Best we can do is endorse Biden. That's the pawn shop guys. That's right. AOC is going to be joining Bernie Sanders to endorse Joe Biden in 2024, making them an even more powerful force that just folds like a puff pastry in the slightest of breezes. After their early endorsement of Biden, it's time for folks to see Bernie and AOC for what they really are, the DNC's biggest assets, because they take grassroots energy and funnel it into a corrupt corporate party that actively fights against progress. That's why Bernie Sanders is your enemy, and he's actually doing evil. He's not actually helping you. Joe Biden is this guy is Joe Biden's best friend, and Joe Biden is your enemy. Joe Biden is a warmonger. So is Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders is a war pig of the highest order and a liar about war and his smear of peace activists. AOC is the same thing. That's who these people are. They're fucking war pigs. They're the worst thing you could be. That's the worst thing you could be. They are slaughterers of people. If only they had the integrity of a Vegas pawn shop. Pawn shops target the poor at their most vulnerable, misleading them, giving them false hope while providing almost no chance for a better life, which makes pawn shops slightly to the left of the Democratic Party. Brianna Joy Gray says, endorsing Joe Biden now is a betrayal of progressive interests. It was true of Bernie Sanders' endorsement, and it's true of AOC. Most Democrats don't want Biden to run. Bernie and AOC are tragically out of step with the movement and the moment. It's called adulting, Brianna. Like the railroad workers or Ukrainian infants, progress needs to grow up, shut up, and get in line. But hey, Bud Light, am I right? Come on. So there you are, AOC. Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Baltimore, San Francisco, Huntington Beach, Rosemont, and Chicago, Las Vegas, Salt Lake City, New York City, Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Stamford, Connecticut, and more, and St. Louis. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for all our tickets for all our shows.